Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. Today, we are looking at the draft grades for the newcomer division of the SADL. Some of y'all probably watched my previous video, which was the draft grade breakdown for the legacy division. This is the same thing. We're just doing it for the newcomer division because we are running two divisions in the SADL this year. Uh, Same thing as last time, basically, just looking at different teams. One thing I guess to note is that the newcomer division is PAL decks or Gen 9 standard format, whereas opposed to the Legacy division was Gen 9 national decks. So that's obviously the big difference with the teams overall. So of course there are some things, some Pokemon that just aren't available, obviously, and some move sets that are different, which has affected, of course, the way some teams work. We are looking at the same things. This is the same draft guideline that was in the first one. Overall synergy and core, speed control, hazard control, offensive diversity, defensive diversity, support Pokemon, Terra Captains. Those are the things that were kind of the overall basics that we're looking at when we are grading uh, these teams. So we're just going to get into it. Uh, it's going to be in draft order. We're going to have the teams shown on the first slide. The next slide will have a breakdown, kind of the pros and cons of each draft and what has led me to give them the grades that I did. So starting off with the Apple Mac Knackle Stacks, coached by Doin' Fine. I gave this team a B minus, and overall, solid Terra Captain choices. I like Galarian Articuno. It's one of the best Terra Captains really available, especially in PAL decks. Um, Rotom Frost is also a pretty good Terra Captain. I think Rampardos would have been a good one as well, but I don't really hate the Rotom Frost Terra Captain. I feel like the Rotom forms always make good Terramons because of the ability, especially Frost with being very weak defensively, being an Ice type. So being able to kind of get some usability out of that, just use the good old Rotom stats that they always have, and just change them, give them a good defensive typing, stuff like Fairy, Water type, stuff like that. Even like being mono electric, and then like having no weakness because you're a levitate mon, stuff like that. So a good Terra Captain choices, pretty good defensive synergy. Anytime I see Pokemon like Primarina, Jirachi, Tentacruel, like those are all really, really, really hard to beat defensive Pokemon. Um, Ursaluna Blood Moon, even itself being very bulky, has very good defensive synergy. Overall, just a good, solid, bulky core. Um, Nothing really, nothing wrong with that. No like outstanding weaknesses. Also has access to webs and does have some pretty good web abusers. Overall, like Rampardos can make good use of webs. Galarian Articuno can like webs, so that way it's a little bit faster. Lokic, same thing, kind of a slower Pokemon, likes the web, so that way it can be faster than a lot of the faster threats. Rotom Frost can take advantage of it with its having that kind of that slower speed, less than 100 speed. And even like Ursaluna, Blood Moon, Jirachi, Primarina, they can still utilize webs as well a little bit. Just as long as you're making your opponent's slower Pokemon faster, you're always giving Pokemon a chance to outspeed them. So overall, that's a pretty solid thing I like to see. I like that synergy that's there with that. Um, as far as some of the negative aspects about this team, speed distribution is lacking. There's a huge gulf between Dragapult and Jirachi. Now, Dragapult will probably come most games because Dragapult is a very, very good draft Pokemon. I had it last season. It's phenomenal. It does so many different things. So Dragapult will be faster than most of your opponent's Pokemon. There's only a handful of Pokemon that are faster than it. So your Dragapult will be in most games. So I don't feel like speed is necessarily a problem, especially with the web support, but I do feel like not having any Pokemon that are in between that section can be a problem because you're relying on Dragapult to be faster than all of them, and in a way, sort of check a lot of offensive threats. So I do feel like that's a negative aspect of the team. As I kind of put in the next part right here, may become too reliant on webs. I feel like once again, because this team is slower, it's going to have to rely on those webs. And there are some matchups where you're going to either struggle to get them up in the first place, or just struggle to keep them up because your opponent just has really good removal. Maybe they have a magic bounce user, something like that could be a very big problem. So once again, like, yeah, using webs is good. A lot of teams use webs as an option. A lot of teams draft web users, but it's always just sort of like an auxiliary thing to do, especially if you kind of use like a low tier on it. So I feel like going out of your way, drafting a web user, and then being like, oh yeah, my team's going to rely heavily on this web user can be a negative thing because that may also force you to bring that web user, like say every match, because at the end of the day, you need the webs to make your team work. Um, hazard court control could be better. Not a lot of great hazard removal on this team. I think Tentacruel, I think is the only removal. That's not good. Tentacruel being the only remover does suck as well. There are a few rockers. Jirachi, I believe Rampardos gets rock, and of course Vikavolt. So there's not a lot of hazard diversity either. No spikes. Um, does have a grounded poison, which is good to get rid of toxic spikes. Overall, hazard control is definitely lacking. And the last spot, I just put Dupiter. I realize this is kind of like, I don't say a throwaway pick, but I feel like using your tier 7 to didn't mean to go that far back. Using your tier 7 to draft something you already have covered with Vikavolt, already being a web setter, it's unnecessary. Like if you want to draft like a funny kind of memey tier 7, that's fine. I do feel like the more you do so, the more you are at least wasting one of your picks. I feel like there could have been a better option than Dupiter, especially because this team already has a web setter. Overall, it is a pretty solid team. I do like Dragapult a lot. It's a very good Pokemon. I took it second overall last season. It's gone first overall in other drafts before. It's that good. Good Terra Captain choices. Like I said, Primarina, also another Pokemon I drafted last year that I love a lot in draft. I think it's very underrated. A lot of hard hitters, too. I think overall this team is pretty solid, but it does have some pretty glaring weaknesses, especially with the reliant on webs and just lack of solid hazard control. I feel like could be a problem for this team. I feel like this team is going to end up bringing a lot of the same Pokemon every week, and that'll be its biggest issue. Overall, still pretty good. B minus, I think it's very fair. Next up, we have the Esper Wings, grade of B plus, coached by Nixie. Looking at this team, some pros, obviously great sand synergy, Excadrill, Tyranitar, Houndstone. That's a lot of sand synergy. We saw this in the Legacy division, I believe, with Scorpion's team. Uh, he had a heavy sand team with 3 sand rush users. This team is a little less dependent on that, having only 2. Um, hazard removal is pretty solid. Obviously with Kamala, Reboot, and Excadrill all being able to remove hazards. Obviously, that's really, really good. Trying to think. No Pokemon. I do not think any Pokemon have defog. Grounded Poison's good. Get rid of toxic spikes. Um, diverse defensive and support Pokemon. That's very true. Slowbro and Mungus. That's a solid regenerator core. Articuno with the Terra, very, very solid Pokemon. I think Terra gives it a lot of options, allows it to become a very flexible defensive Pokemon, um, especially when you're not bringing Whimsicott or Reboot. Sorry about that. I had to take a drink. My mouth. You probably hear my voice. Throat's a little dry. Zamazenta, Tyranitar obviously provide great defensive support while not being necessarily outright very defensive Pokemon. Like, I mean, Zamazenta obviously does have its whole thing is Iron Defense Body Press, but you're usually using it more offensive, but it's able to leverage its defensive capabilities while being offensive. Same thing with Tyranitar getting the Sand boost for its special defense. So overall, like I said, Whimsicott's a great support Pokemon. Feel like this team has a lot of great things going for it on that end. Um, and then also very good speed distribution, even outside of sand. Zamazenta very high top end speed. Pokemon like Whimsicott coming in with solid speed. Thunder Asterion, Excadrill all have solid speed. Overall, good reboot. I think its speed is like somewhere in the 90s, I believe, maybe 80s. So that's a very good speed. Another Pokemon has solid speed control. So overall, that's very good speed, especially even outside of the sand. Obviously, Escudero is very fast in sand, but outside of it, it does have good speed options. I like to see that, not relying on the sand that much. There's a very slight ice weakness here, mainly because the best resist that this team has are Reboot, which is not not a very good defensive Pokemon. Obviously, with Eviolite, it can be kind of bulky. And then Slowbro, which is unfortunately weak to freeze dry, which could cause some problems. So I do feel like this team does have a little bit of an ice weakness that could be hard for it to deal with. Doubling up on grass types, for example. Uh, can cause that issue. Lack of hazard diversity. This team just has rocks coming from Excadrill and Tyranitar. Yeah, I believe that's it. So only two hazard setters, both of them only being rocks. That's kind of a bit of a negative. I think it would be better if this team like had at least a spike user or something like that. Maybe a way to get up for T spikes. And then also one last thing, small little nitpick. It's not overall a big negative with this team. I do believe Terra Houndstone would have been a better option over Whimsicott, especially with this being a sand team. I think Whimsicott is a good. Don't get me wrong, Whimsicott is a good Terramon. It's able to utilize its really high speed and kind of do a lot of different things with that. Yeah, leveraging that Terra as a defensive option or as an offensive option. However, though, Houndstone, like I said, being in the sand, I think it wants a Terra. Terra Ghost, Terra Fairy, um, Terra Fighting. Even it can do a bunch of cool stuff with that. I really feel like this that should have been a Terra Houndstone over a Terra Whimsicott in this draft. So I feel like that's just a small nitpick. Overall, B plus. It's a very good draft. Has some synergy there. Just has some pretty big noticeable weaknesses that I feel like just hold it down from getting into that A category. And also just like obviously it does have its strengths, but I feel like it doesn't have like a really big strength where it's just like this is like it doesn't have like a big threat or like some really crazy synergy that can also put it up to that upper echelon as well. It's just a solid team that has some weaknesses. Next up, the Detroit Rebel Room, coached by Brorb or Brody. Um, Gave it an A grade. Really good Terra captains. Reggie Drago's a really good Terramon. Doug Trio's a phenomenal tier 7. Paldean Tauros as well could use I believe is definitely the better Terra option from Rotom Fan, and also is a good Pokemon that can utilize Terra very well. I mean, the Paldean Tauros forms are actually really good in draft in general. The regular one tends to be the least used because it's just a normal fighting type, but obviously Terra does allow it to have more synergy. Great support options. Cobalion, Alolan Ninetales, Petrarunt, those are all really good support Pokemon. Hisuian Samurott, phenomenal hazard support. Talonflame as well. Really good in that category. Very high versatility. I kind of just went over that with the support options. You got a lot of Pokemon that can do a lot of different things. And very good hazard control as well. Having a rapid spinner, um, one of one of the best, if not the best, rapid spinners in the game. A solid defogger as well with Talonflame. So overall, pretty solid team. I feel like could use one more hazard remover, as you can kind of see over here. I do feel like having only two is definitely a negative, but this team also actually has access to a lot of hazards as well. Um, Ogerpon setting spikes, Hisuian Samurott setting spikes. Tropicos can set rocks, I believe. Cobalion can set rocks. I think Doug Trio even has access to rocks. I can't remember if it does or not. So this team actually does have a lot of great hazard setting options. I just feel like it could use one more hazard remover. And unfortunately, it does have a bit of a fighting weakness. Having four Pokemon weak to fighting. Obviously there is an immunity and a resist, but they're not enough to balance out the fact that you have four fighting weak Pokemon. I feel like anyway, if you have four or more Pokemon that are weak to one type, even if you have some solid resist and immunities, that's a problem because it definitely is going to have a restriction on your team building. I know personally, just doing some team building this week, for example, I ran into that issue where I realized like, wow, even though I have options to check some of my weaknesses, I still if I bring these Pokemon, I'm bringing all of my Pokemon that are weak to this one type. So I feel like having that does limit you because even though overall your team can check them, in some matchups you might be like, oh, these three Pokemon are really good and they're all weak to this one type, and you're not able to bring maybe you can only bring one resist or one immunity because that's just the way that it fits on your team. And as a result, that could become a problem with your team building and in your play. Overall, though, really solid team. I really like this draft overall. Gave it an A grade because I do feel like it's just good. Just maybe like one change, and it's probably a perfect team to be honest. Next up, the Barcelona Volcaronas, a grade A minus. Another pretty solid draft coming out of Newcomer division. Very good speed distribution, very high end speed with Chin Pao. And then getting things like Iron Moth, Palmot, Tornadus, Incarnate. Those are really good. Having very solid speed outside of that. Tinkatunk has some pretty good speed as well. And then you kind of have some middling speed Pokemon. I do. Oh wait, whoops, went too far back. There we go. I do feel like maybe some like lower than 90 speed could probably do a little bit better, but it's at the end of the day, it's not like the end of the world. Very solid hazard control, having a rapid spinner and really good rapid spinner, really good defogger with Corviknight and Dawn Fan. I think that's pretty good, even though that doesn't have another remover. I would say once again, probably one at least three removers on most teams. That way, you have a wide option of removers. Definitely don't want one because then you're not necessarily forced to bring that Pokemon every game, but there are going to be matchups where you're going to want to bring that Pokemon every game. And obviously, you'll be very limited in doing so by only having one remover. Um, you'll have to bring that a lot. You know what I'm saying? So versatile support options, obviously, the Dawn Fan, the Corviknight, the Slow King, Tinkaton's a great support mon. Tornadus Incarnate having its prankster support with things like Taunt and Tailwind. Obviously, that's a very good Pokemon. As far as support options go, uh, hold on one second. Sorry about that. I was looking at my phone. High offensive pressure. That's very big thing this team does. Chin Pao and Iron Moth just straight up just want to kill things all the time. Tornadus Incarnate as well, being a Terramon, does have a lot of offensive pressure. Ditto is one of the best revenge killers in the game because it is very anti setup. Um, so overall, very good offensive pressure. Only negatives I can find with this game, this team. Sorry, not game. Like I said, one more hazard remover would have been solid. I think that would have put this team over the edge. But also, I feel like the low tier draft could have been a little bit better. Tornadus Incarnate is phenomenal. It is one of the better Terra captains, one of the better Terramons, one of the better tier fives, really and truthfully overall. Take a ton is pretty good. Ditto is hit or miss because it's going to have matchups where it's going to do really well. And it's just going to have matchups where you're just not going to bring it. And I feel like Quilladin and Oinkologne are not phenomenal Pokemon. I feel like there were better options on the board, especially having to Terra Quilladin because you don't really Terra Ditto. I feel like you could have gotten a better tier 6 out of this. So I feel like maybe those last three picks could have been a little bit better. Overall, this team is still very solid. I gave it an A minus because I do like what it does. I think it's very balanced. I think it has a lot of offensive pressure, and I think it does well in the hazard department for the most part. Very solid team. Like I said, it has good support options as well. A minus grade for this team. Next up, we have the Bronx Beartics, and unfortunately, this is one of the lowest grades I've given out on so far between both divisions. I didn't want to give a grade this low. Unfortunately, one thing I'll say to caveat this too, these grades are purely based off of draft. This is not based off player performance or how good I think the person is going to do. They're not like a projection. Like a projection for the season or anything. Obviously, especially these newcomers, I don't know how well they play. I've played with two of them, right? I think in the speed draft that we did before the season kicked off. That was it. So I don't know how the newcomers play. The legacy coaches, I have a better understanding of their skill. I will say most of the legacy coaches are pretty even. A lot of the legacy coaches we had this season are in the playoff picture. Most of them were right there, either in the playoffs or were like a game or two outside of it. Um, so obviously, I don't know how the newcomers play. So this is not a reflection of the players themselves. This is just or the coaches themselves. This is just a reflection of their draft. I just want to say that before, just in case anybody gets upset or feels offended, like I'm picking on them. This is not what that is at all. Because, like I said, I don't know how good how good you guys are actually until the season starts. Overall, though, we're just going to look at this real quick. Some good things this team does have pretty solid speed distribution. Sneasler has really high end speed. And you have mons like Shreds and Screamtail, which have solid speed. Um, two Rotom forms, so you're kind of hovering around that 80. Tauros Blaze as well, that has a pretty solid speed tier overall. Then you have some slower mons like Hatterene and Klefki, Arboliva. So very solid speed distribution. Solid hazard control, has a few rockers, has a hazard spinner. I mean, a hazard spinner, a rapid spinner, has magic bounce on Hatterene, has Klefki for spikes. So does pretty solid in that a category. Does have some terrain synergy. Now, terrain synergy is a little I guess inconsistent is the best word. Arboliva is not the best terrain setter. Obviously, it can set terrain, and Sneasler can benefit from that. Really feel like a Rillaboom or a Thwackey would have been a more reliable option there, especially if you want to go with grassy terrain. Um, but it does exist on this team. Whoops, I keep going back too far. I need to stop doing that. Lots of support options: Screamtail, Hatterene, Klefki, Iron Treads, two Rotom forms, Arboliva. Those are all really, really, really good support Pokemon that have support options. So I feel like that's going to be a strength of this team. However, though, D plus rating or grading, kind of know there's some problems with this team. This team stacks a lot of similar typings and weaknesses. I believe there is, see, one, two, three grass types, four. No, one, two, three fairy types, and four psychic types. Yeah, so a lot of stack types. This team is obliterated by ghost types, having that many psychic types and only uh having no resist. Right? Yeah. No, has an immunity. I believe is a normal type. Has an immunity, but having that many Pokemon that are weak to Ghost Spam completely obliterates this team. Poison does really well into this team as well. Um, Really and truly having to rely on both Treads and Klefki for the resistance, or well, actually they're immune, but and then Caesar is immune as well, but is fairly weak to poison as well. Stacking this many types is never a good thing. You really don't want to have more than like maybe two types on a team. If you can kind of stretch it to where like you have some really good immunities, like say you have three steel types, but one's immune to ground, one's immune to fighting, and the other's immune to something else, then that's cool because you're kind of helping get rid of that typing imbalance. Like I know last season I had Earthworm and Treads, but my Earthworm is obviously immune to ground through Earth Eater, so that wasn't that big of a problem. They did share two weaknesses, but they didn't share the full weakness. So I was able to complement that weakness to fighting and fire through other Pokemon, primarily like Primarina was a good partner for them. Uh, Dragapult as well did the same thing. So those are two Pokemon I had last season that helped deal with that. Stacking this many weaknesses and not having good resist to them or immunities is disastrous. I mean, I want to be as real as I can be because obviously I want to put this out there so people will get better. Like I said, we're not making fun of people. We're not trying to point fingers at people. This is so people will know how their draft went, and what some things that they can do to make it better. This team also lacks a lot of offensive pressure. It's going to heavily rely on Sneasler for the majority of its offensive pressure, which is obviously can be very inconsistent, especially without reliable terrain. I really feel like Treads does have some offensive capabilities, but it's not the best. Some of your offensive threats like Hatterene is kind of slow or believe us slow. So you're really, 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 really depending on Sneasler for most of your offensive pressure. It needs another hazard remover option. Treads is a rapid spinner. That's it. Obviously, Hatterene, you're kind of relying on Hatterene to keep hazards off the field. But in a matchup where, Hatterene either can't keep hazards off the field or you're not bringing Hatterene, then you're relying just on Treads for your hazard removal. Obviously, having only one remover is never a good option, even with a magic bounce user. And then no grounded poison. So this team gets eaten alive by toxic spikes, unfortunately. I will say, obviously, having the magic bounce user and having your rapid spinner be immune to toxic spikes by being a steel type is good and does help mitigate that. But once again, if you can't get the toxic spikes off the field by just sending in a poison type, then you run the risk of having your Pokemon get poisoned. So overall, the weaknesses, stacking all the types that it has is just not very good. I think that's probably the biggest negative going towards this team and the big reason why I dropped it so many points. And then obviously all the other things just add on to it. I feel like there are definitely a few changes that could be made, preferably dropping one of the Rotom forms would be pretty good. Probably dropping Calyrex, trying to find a better 7. Probably getting rid of one of these fairy types here in the middle. You don't need all three of these. They're all very good support Pokemon that do different things, but you don't need all three of them. Um, so dropping one of those, getting something else, maybe something a little more offensive would be nice. I feel like this team can get better with just a few changes, but right now, as it stands, it's not very good. Next up, the Rilla Boom Booms, coached by Ali Bomb or Ali Pomp. Um, A plus. This is the best draft in Newcomer Division, straight up. Solid hazard control. You got some rockers. You got some defoggers. Um, has a tidy up user, has access to spikes. So very, very good hazard control. Good speed distribution. Spectre, very, very high top end speed. Chinchino, Manchow, good speed as well. Toros, underrated speed. Cramorant, right there. Komodo. So very, very good speed distribution through and through. Not There's not like a huge speed gap. Great defensive synergy. Gambit is obviously has a lot of defensive power, even as an offensive Pokemon. Como, Galarian, Weezing, Gastrodon, Registeel. That's a very solid defensive core right there. So very, very good in that aspect as well. And good offensive pressure. Spectre and Gambit are going to put a lot of pressure on teams. Me and Shao can be very fast and annoying. Como has a lot of potential to clean up late games. Chinchino, phenomenal sweeper. Tauros can punch holes in things, especially with that Terra. So this is a very, very well constructed team. I like it a lot. It's not necessarily the type of team I would use, but I love it. Cons could use one more remover, preferably a rapid spinner. Obviously, like I said, it does have good removal with Weezing plus Chinchino, but it is only two forms of. Well, I guess it does have Cramorant, as well as a Defogger. So it does have three forms of hazard removal. But the problem is, all of those forms of hazard removal do remove this team's hazards, and it has really, really good hazard setting. A lot of diversity with its hazards. It wants to get hazards up. So I feel like having a rapid spinner would be the only thing that this team could do to make itself better. It's not the end of the world. I still gave it an A plus because it is just that good of a team. If I had to nitpick one thing, that would probably be it. Maybe get a better 7. Maybe drop your 7 for a spinner. I'm not sure. Um, Other than that, though, that's a phenomenal draft. Really good draft. Next up, the Giratina Victory, uh, coached by 5NDR. We gave this one an A minus. Very, very good team. Great Sun synergy. Right off the bat, having Torkoal, Raging Bolt, Gouging Fire, Shift Tree, and even a little Ivysaur down there at the bottom. A lot of Sun synergy. Very good hazard control. Torkoal with the rapid spin. Noivern with the defog, and I believe Shift Tree also has defog. Could be wrong about that. But very good hazard control. Obviously, good setters. Skarmory having both rocks and spikes. Azelf having rocks. Torkoal having rocks. Do have a grounded poison. So yeah, there's a lot of options for this team in that hazard department. I feel like overall it's a strong, very, very strong suit of this. Um, Very bulky, lots of defensive synergy overall. Galarian, Slowbro, Torkoal, Skarmory, that's a very, very good defensive core. Even Scrafty and Gramble having two Intimidate users, two very bulky defensive Pokemon down there. Um, yeah, and then even like Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire. Offensive, they're primarily offensive Pokemon, but they're extremely bulky. High HP, high defenses on both of them. So this is a very bulky team as well that does have that does still have really high offensive pressure, especially in the sun. Gouging Fire, Raging Bolt, they're gonna put a lot of pressure on teams. Shift Tree as well with this high speed. Noivern can Terra to get it to utilize that as well. So very, very solid overall team, offensively and defensively. I feel like it just has a lot of good synergy, especially in the sun. Some cons about the team: grounded, very weak. Definitely having raging fire, gouging. Not raging fire. Jesus, Raging Bolt, Gouging Fire, Torkoal, Galarian, Slowbro, all being weak to fire. Obviously, this team does have immunities and resistances, but having three teams Jesus fucking Christ, I can't talk today. Having four Pokemon weak to ground is obviously can be a bit of a no-no, even with, like I said, resistances and immunities. Also, a bit fairy weak. Raging Bolt, Noivern, Shiftry, Scrafty, all weak to fairy. Obviously, two of those Pokemon are Terramon, so it's not the biggest issue. And it does have resist like Galarian, Slowbro, Torkoal, Skarmory. So this team does not, and even Ivysaur down there at the bottom. This team does not fear fairy types as much as it fears ground types. I feel like ground types will give this team a little bit more trouble than fairy types will. But it is worth noting having two types that you have for Pokemon week 2. Definitely a bit of a negative. And then also this team might turn out to be a little reliant on Sun. It does have pretty solid speed. Noivern and Azelf being very, very fast without Sun is obviously a big plus. Raging Bolt and Gouging Fire aren't going to need that Sun for their speed. They're primarily using it to boost their attack or special attack. But I do feel like you're going to want to bring Sun most games. You're not going to bring it every game, tries to shape things up, but you're going to want to bring Sun most games. And I feel like that can be a negative aspect. But obviously, this team is just really well built, offensively and defensively. So I do feel like that's not going to be that big of a drag because this is just going to be one of those teams where, yeah, it's bringing Sun, but what are you going to do? So A minus grade for sure, in my opinion. Um, Very, very solid team overall. Next up, we have the Obstagooners, and once again, a low grade. I think this is the lowest grade I've handed out, uh, which is very sad overall. I kind of struggled to find a few positive things to say about this team. Once again, I'm not trying to be overly negative. This team does have very good wall breakers. I will say that. Urshifu Single Strike, Landorus even, Porygon Z, Sylveon can be a pretty strong wall breaker. This it does have very strong offensive options. Ceruledge even can not real. I mean, it's a solid wall breaker. Has a pretty high attack stat. Has access to swords and strong stab with Poltergeist. So team does have a lot of offensive power. Um, and does have some solid defensive options. Landers, Therian, Dondozo, Sylveon, even Clefairy can be of use. Muck, even solid, some solid defensive Pokemon overall. Sylveon, I think I might already said Sylveon. So the defensive capabilities are there as well as the offense. Oh shit! I'm going the wrong way. Well, I just spoiled a bunch of draft grades. I'm out of it today. I apologize, guys. I've been like fucking up this entire video. I'm very sorry. I just got off of work, so um, but yeah. So there are some positives of the team. It's not all bad, but at the end of the day, it's more negative than positive. Very poor speed distribution from this team. Regieleki is the only Pokemon on this team that has a base speed higher than 100. I think Indeedee Male might be 105. I don't remember how fast Indeedee Male is actually. It's either 95 or 105. But yeah, Regieleki being the only Pokemon on this team that is consistently faster than 100. Let's put it that way, because obviously if you bring in DD female, you're going to be slower. Um, is bad, especially because Regieleki is not the best Pokemon. It is the fastest Pokemon in the game, but it has issues with its move set. It's not able to Terra, so having only one Pokemon that's not going to be useful in most matchups being your fastest Pokemon is a pretty big negative. Team does have some pretty good priority, but it has very poor terrain synergy. The Indeedee on this team feels very off. This team wants to use its priority as much as possible, or Shifu Sucker Punch, Ceruledge Shadow Sneak, even like sneaky stuff like Sylveon, like you can do like Goofy Choice Banded Terra, I mean not Terra, but Pixelate Quick Attack or some shit with Sylveon. It's kind of goofy. Regieleki even has extreme speed. I think Muck has Shadow Sneak. You can't use that with the terrain, so I feel like this team doesn't have good terrain synergy, and there's nothing to abuse psychic terrain either. There's no like Psy spam, there's no Shell Smash users, no high setup Pokemon. Really and truthfully, Ceruledge, like I said, might be the best to utilize it, but it can't even shadow sneak in terrain. It's going to have to rely heavily on like weak armor. So like that's the only real abuser that this team has, unfortunately. So I feel like the terrain synergies isn't great. Hazard control isn't great either. Regieleki is the only hazard removal on this team, so you're going to be bringing it every game, and it's just going to be just there to remove hazards. It's going to be dead weight, unfortunately, in a lot of games, and I feel like that's a very big negative as well. Also, this team is a little ground weak. Regieleki, Ceruledge, Muck before it, Terras, all weak to ground, and only one immunity in the form of Lander Asterion. So yeah, also ground weak as well. So very, very, very not great draft, unfortunately. I feel like there are some ways to make this team better. trying to get Pokemon with better speed that fill in that gap between Regieleki and the rest of the team. Very good as would be a very good options, and trying to build around some terrain synergy, either removing the NDD or finding something that abuses the terrain a lot better. I feel like would make this team a little more, uh, I guess, just usable, right? I mean, it's not phenomenal at the end of the day. I'm not trying to, like I said, I'm not trying to be rude. That's not what I'm doing at all. It's just trying to give grades and help people, learn a little bit. I know a lot of these guys, or a lot of the coaches coming in, they're new to draft. That's what we pride ourselves on. We pride ourselves on being a, it's the showdown amateur draft league. It's for people who are new to draft or inexperienced in draft. A lot of our coaches, even in the legacy division, have only played in a few draft leagues. We've had some guys who just have very limited, even just not just draft experience, competitive Pokemon experience. So we're trying to help people learn and get better at that. So if they do, play in other draft leagues or continue to play competitive Pokemon, that they're the best they can possibly be. So that's the reason why we do these draft grades. I mean, most draft leagues do draft grades. It's not just us, but one of the reasons we want to do it is to help people as much as possible learn the game and learn what their mistakes were and correct them, in the season and then next time they play in a draft league. So we're going to move forward with Zoroark's Destroyers. I love this tongue twister of a name. Always kind of trips me up. But overall, solid team. Gave it a B plus. Great hazard diversity. I like the hazard setters on this team. Archolodon, Ogerpon, Deoxys Defense, Clodsire, all really, really good hazard setters. Spikes, rocks, toxic spikes, even. So very good in that department. Great range synergy. This team is phenomenal range synergy, honestly. Politoed with the Palafin, the Archolodon, Kilowattrel even likes the terrain, likes the rain as well, and very good defensive and support utility. Obviously, Deoxys, Defense, Clodsire, Moltres, all very solid defensive Pokemon. Archolodon has a lot of is very bulky. Palafin's very bulky as well. Hitmonchan can be defensive. Doxbun very defensive. Some good support options as well. Politoed with Encore. Ogerpon, Deoxys Defense having access to things like Encore and stuff like that, being very good in those aspects. Has a lot of different things it can do. So very good offensively, defensively, and support. Kind of fits all three of those categories. Obviously, it's not the perfect team because while this team does have great hazard setting, it does not have good hazard removal. Its sole hazard removal being Hitmonchan. So kind of a similar thing to last time where not only do you have one hazard remover, unlike some other teams, like for example, we looked at a team earlier that Iron Treads. Iron Treads is a great Pokemon. I drafted Iron Treads last season. I brought it a lot of times, and sometimes it was my hazard removal, but that's just because it fit on the teams I was bringing it on. With that being said, when you're having to rely on Regieleki or in this case Hitmonchan as your only hazard removal, that's very tough because you're forced to bring that Pokemon anytime that say you make a hazard weak team or you look at your team and you're like, I don't like, because for example, you can always get, bring heavy duty boots and not worry about hazards. The problem with that is though, is that you're forced to bring heavy duty boots. You're forced to bring an item, use an item slot to not take hazard damage. And instead of bringing something that can remove it reliably, you're forced to shoehorn in a Hitmonchan or a Regieleki to do that. And that's obviously a negative thing. Um, so I feel like this team could definitely have better hazard removal. Also, could benefit from another rain abuser. I would definitely like to see this team have a Swift Swim mod. It is a rain team that has solid rain users. Like I said, Kilowattrel, Archolodon, Palafin, they all really they all benefit heavily from the rain. This team, like I said, is going to work well in the rain, but I feel like this team could have a Swift Swim user. Definitely could use something like that to just give it a little bit more range synergy. This team is also a bit ice weak, especially to freeze dry. This team does have a few ice weaknesses, but on top of that, all of its ice resistances are water types. So freeze dry just obliterates this team. So I feel like that's a very big negative as well. Overall, this team does a lot of things really well. It does have some pretty big weaknesses. Like I said, that hazard removal and the ice weakness pretty bad. The Swiss swim thing is not the biggest, but I feel like it's something that could make this team better. Overall, would definitely help its grade go up a little bit. Still overall very solid draft. B plus grade is very fair. Next we have the Soaring Stingers, also with a B plus grade. Great electric terrain synergy right off the bat, very similar to my team I drafted, having the Iron Valiant, the Iron Crown, the Raikou, all of them loving the electric terrain that Pincurchin provides. And overall, just high offensive pressure, kind of going off what I just said as well. Valiant puts a lot of pressure on teams. Cinderace can as well with its high speed. Iron Crown can be very dangerous. Raikou as well. Even Pokemon like Flygon have pretty good offensive pressure, especially with the Terra. Overall, very threatening team. Uh, some weaknesses though does have a ground weakness. Cinderace, Iron Crown, Raikou, Pincurchin, and Overquill all weak to ground. That's 5 ground weaknesses. Not a good thing, especially when you don't have bad resistances and immunities. Sinistcha obviously is a resist, but Flygon Flygon usually will be pretty good as resistant, but then like one of your immunities is Swanna. So like obviously that's not a great Pokemon that you're gonna rely on a lot. And having 5 weaknesses is a big problem. So five ground weaknesses is a very big problem, especially with such a spammable type and spammable move like Earthquake in the game. Hazard control definitely could be a little bit better as well. Relying a lot on Cinderace to court change, which does of course remove your own hazards, and then even like Swanna's the fog, not the best overall. So definitely can have better hazard control, and also low tier picks could be a little bit better. I don't like the. I don't hate the Flygon. I think it has a lot of potential. Dunsparce is also pretty good, a little underrated in my opinion. But like Glaceon and Swanna, I just don't. I think there were better options on the board for this team. Definitely could have picked something a little bit better there. Maybe something that either had some terrain synergy or filled in the gaps that we kind of talked about. I would like to see, obviously, anytime I say like, oh, I don't like this pick, I really want that person to prove me wrong, to be completely honest, because one of the things that is, I kind of touched on this. One of the things that is hard to do when doing draft grades is because I don't understand, or I'm not inside the head of the person when they made this draft. My draft, I know where my headspace was. I know what I was cooking. I know why I drafted certain things. I don't know that for other people. So it is very hard, or not necessarily hard, but it is it's just different. I can't look at a team and say, yeah, this is what this person was thinking. Sometimes it's obvious, like with this team, it is a electric terrain team, right? I know that's what it wants to do, but I don't know why the Glaceon's there. I don't think it's very good, but at the end of the day, hopefully the ones and zeros proves me wrong. I want to see him do really good with this Glaceon, so we'll see. Overall, though, it is a good team, B plus grade, nothing wrong with that at all. Next up, the Texas Clawitzers. This is another B plus. Very good team. Great sun synergy. Obviously, the Walking Way, Hisuian, Lilligant, Chiyu all want that sun from Ninetales. Even like the Oricorio, like the fire form, can be good. Hisuian Electrode can even use it with like Solar Beam. So very good sun synergy. Good Terra Captain selection as well. Hisuian Electrode's a great Terramon. Oricorio as well. So I feel like those are really good options. I feel like those were the best Terra options that they had available. And they took advantage of that. And just overall strong offensive pressure. It's going to happen with a lot of your teams that have terrain or weather. They're going to have a lot of offensive pressure. Chiyu and Walking Wake put a lot of pressure on teams. They're hard to check, and they just straight up blow up Pokemon all the time. Hisu and Lilligan as well, having a solid a solid like chlorophyll user, something else that can abuse sun in a different way. It's also a big plus. Hazard control could definitely be a little bit better. I really feel like this team is just setting up rocks pretty much. Metagross and Mudsdale, that's kind of all they're doing, throwing up rocks. Mandibuzz and Oricorio as well, only being the only forms of removal. So you're relying on defoggers and rocks. No spikes, no rapid spin, no toxic spikes, nothing like that. I feel like you would definitely want to try to work those in your team. Also, the grounded poison being Arbok also does suck a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but at the end of the day, you're not bringing Arbok in most games, so you're not oftentimes having the ability to remove those hazards. Remove toxic spikes without having to rely on your defoggers. Team does have a bit of an ice weakness as well. Hisuian Lilligant, Mandibus, Hisuian Electrode, Oricorio, Mudsdale, all weak to ice. Obviously, Terra does kind of mitigate that as well. And then, of course, Chi-Yu, Metagross, Vaporeon, all resisting it. So it's not the end of the world. And Ninetales, it's not the end of the world. There are solid resist to it. But once again, 5 Pokemon weak to ice can be a bit of a problem, especially with Freeze Dry running around as well. So, like, for example, Vaporeon is going to be able to resist it very well. And then like walking weight gets obliterated by freeze dry. So definitely something to think about as well. And also might depend a little bit too much on Sun for offense. One of the things that some teams that run like terrain or weather do, and I've kind of touched on this before, is that all of their offensive options rely, or not necessarily all of them, but most of their offensive pressure comes from the sun. Now, Walking Wake and Chiyu are pretty threatening outside of the sun, but you can see the clicking. Like, hey, yeah, these Pokemon are great sun users, and I'm going to use them mostly in the sun. Sui and Lilligant can work outside of the sun as well, but it's going to want a chlorophyll. It's going to be best when it's abusing chlorophyll. But outside of that, your offensive options are a bit limited. Metagross can hit very hard, but it's not extremely fast. Sweet Electrode is fast, but doesn't hit extremely hard. Nor Choreo, obviously having access to Quiver Dance is pretty good, but it's not, that's not, or Choreo, it's not like your bread and butter. It's not the make or break for your team. So I feel like the offensive pressure is going to rely a lot on the sun, and I feel like this team definitely could use like maybe 1 or 2 Pokemon that are a little bit better outside of the sun. Chi-Yu, like I said, will be fine for the most part. Walking Weight can be a little heavily sun dependent, especially with Hydro Steam being boosted in the sun. So it definitely wants to try to use that to its advantage. So you're going to want to bring sun when you use Walking Wake, and I feel like that can be a bit negative because you don't want to be too centered around it. Um, and going back to like Giratina Victory, for example, I said they were a little bit dependent on the sun. They do have offensive options outside of the sun. Gouging Fire is threatening without sun. Raging Bolt is also threatening without sun. But and then even like Azelf and stuff that were on that team, uh, that team can work without sun. I feel like this team is going to be slightly more limited. Overall, I gave it a good grade, B plus. It's a great team. I do like it a lot. Flopping Feebas, B minus grade. They're coached by the 13th guy, um, who I do not believe was the 13th pick. I think he had the 12th pick, just shy of getting the funny pick. Overall, team's pretty solid. A lot of offensive diversity. I like seeing that. You got some hard hitters, you got some good setup mons, you got some like sneaky, goofy kind of Pokemon. You got some solid priority. Really good diversity on that offensive angle. Very good low tier draft. Scyther, Bisharp, Sableye. Weird Ear is not the best, but Ampharos is a pretty good, one of the better 7. So this is, I think, is a very overall good low tier draft. Um, Unfortunately, this team does not have good top end speed. Espathra, I think, is the fastest Pokemon on base speed. And even though it does have speed boost, you're relying on its ability, which means it doesn't have immediate speed. So that is a bit of a negative. And then, Scyther, Volcarona, they have good speed as well, but a lot of this team is very, very slow. Ampharos, Bisharp, Sableye. Sableye, has Prankster and Bisharp has Sucker Punch, so they're not super way down by that. But overall, this team is very slow compared to a lot of teams. So I think it will have some trouble keeping up. Hazard control isn't the best. You're really relying heavily on Great Tusks to come in. Scyther does have defog, but I feel like this team's hazard control could be a little bit better. Pheasantipity, unfortunately, doesn't have access to defog, which sucks because it's a bird. It should definitely have that. Um, also, believe, really and truthfully, just mostly, yeah, it has only rocks as well. Great Tusk and Bisharp, yeah, only rock setters as well. So I feel like this team is lacking in both the hazard removal and hazard setting department, and also it does have a ground weakness. Obviously, with Ampharos, Bisharp, Pheasantipity, all being weak to rock, and the only Pokemon that is immune to it being Scyther. is very limiting. So I feel like that's something this team is going to struggle with. Very weak to earthquake spam. Going to have to rely on Scyther to get through that. Terra does allow you to kind of bystep that, but at the end of the day, could be a big problem down the line. So, uh, good team. Feel like it does have some things it needs to make it better. Um, feel like it just doesn't have like some really big doesn't have like a big pop factor to like kind of jack up its grade a lot. It's really just this is a solid team that has some negative aspects. So B minus grade. Next up is the Sacramento Blings. Uh, B minus grade as well. A lot of B grades. I think that kind of defines what the newcomer division was. We had a lot of people who seemed to know what they were doing and were going in the right direction, but they didn't fill all of the gaps, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at with these teams. Overall, very good hazard diversity on this team. Having spike setters, having some rockers. I believe I don't think Galarian Slowking gets access to yeah, I don't think it's access to toxic spikes, but yeah, I mean rockers, rock setters, spikers. I like seeing that, having it for multiple different Pokemon. Lots of offensive and defensive synergy. This is a very balanced team. The Baxcalibur, the Ogerpon, Hearthflame, those are very dangerous hard hitters. Miss Magius is a really good Terra Captain, Thunderous Incarnate, fast, can hit hard, but also at the same time, Galarian Slowking, Florges, Milotic, Earthworm, Sandaconda, even. That's really, really good defensive Pokemon. Overall, this is a very, very good balanced team, and it had a really good low tier draft. I love Earthworm. I've had it last season. I guess MS Magus is a really good Terramon. Sandaconda can do a lot of different things. Girder is also a Pokemon I drafted last season. Shout out Girder if y'all know what it do. It's what he do. And then Mighty Hina, I mean, it's not bad. I think there are worse. There are definitely worse tier sevens. Probably a handful of better tier sevens, but it has value. I definitely think it can do some things this season. Overall, it is a good team. I like the how balanced it is. I love balanced teams. It's definitely a team I would use. I will say though, this team does need more hazard removal, and the big reason why I kind of point this as well. This team does have a slight rock weakness. So Baxcalibur, Thunderous, and Ogerpon are all weak to rock. Obviously, that's a very negative thing. This team's only form of hazard removal is Girder Defog, and having three Pokemon that are weak to rock, but also one of them, Ogerpon Hearthflame, cannot wear boots. It always wears the mask, so it's always weak to rock. So having three Pokemon weak to rock and one of them who can never wear boots, and your only form of hazard removal being Girder, is not a good thing. That drags this team so down so much. By far the biggest negative aspect of this team is not only just being, oh, I only have one remover, but then having so many Pokemon weak to rock and only one remover. This team gets chewed up by stealth rocks, unfortunately. And overall, also another thing too, this is a bit of a slow team. Um, really, the fastest Pokemon being Thunderous. It's not the best thing. It does have good ways to spread Thunderwave, obviously, with Thunderous having Prankster Thunderwave. But Thunderous being your fastest Pokemon and only having, Ogerpon, Hearthflame, and Miss Magius, the only other Pokemon above 100. And then not really having great like intermediate speed as well. Baxcalibur sits around 85, and then the rest of these Pokemon are hovering in that like 60, 70 range. So this is a very, very slow team as well. I feel like I said, I do like this team and I want to see it succeed. I feel like it is like one or two like picks away from being a really good team. Overall, I just feel like it needs, like I said, more hazard removal. Relying on Girder for your hazard removal is not a good thing. Um, could definitely be a lot better. I want to see it be better because I do like the idea of this team. And then last, and certainly not least, we have our Juggernaut Jirachis with a C plus grade. Overall, this team was another team that I liked the direction of, but was had some very glaring negative flaws. Hazard diversity is up there. Garchomp and Deoxys both being able to set rocks and spikes is phenomenal. Diancie has access to rocks. So, a very good team when it comes to hazards. They're going to be able to keep them up. Um, Lots of versatility as well. The Oxys Speed is like the king of versatility. Garchomp's pretty versatile. Um, Arcanine can do some goofy things. Diancie can do some fun things. Blastoise can be pretty fun. So this team does have a lot of versatility in that area. Very good support mons too. Arcanine, kind of like I just touched on. Deoxys Speed, Garchomp. They have like good solid support options. Alolan Muck can be very support heavy. Dusclops, Diancie, they're really cool defense. Supportive Pokemon. So a lot of versatility with this draft. I do like it a lot. One big problem this team is unfortunately another ground weakness. I feel like a lot of uh the newcomers drafted very ground weak Pokemon. Ground is one of the best offensive typings. It has a very I think it's super effective against 5 types. So and it has very spammable with moves like Earthquake. So a lot of teams unfortunately fall into the trap of just being very ground weak. Sorry, I'm flipping through the slides while I'm talking. And unfortunately, this team is like that. You know, the Denny, Diancie, Arcanine, Alolan Muck all being ground weak. Does have, obviously a ground immunity with Galarian Zapdos and a resistance with Meganium. So it's not the end of the world, but I feel like this team can get bowled over very easy by Earthquake spam. Definitely could use one more hazard remover as well. It's pretty much relying on Scissor and Blastoise to be its main hazard removal. And obviously, those Pokemon are good, do have good hazard removal options, but I feel like this team just could use one more hazard remover would benefit it. Speed distribution also needs to be better. This is another team that just has a massive gap between its fastest Pokemon. Deoxys Speed being one of the fastest Pokemon in the game, and then Garchomp sitting at 102 means that you're going to be bringing Deoxys Speed a lot of times. Don't get me wrong. It's going to be in most of your matchups because it is that good of a Pokemon. But at the end of the day, Deoxys Speed can be limited in what it does. So once again, Deoxys Speed isn't going to be able to check everything that's slower than it all the time. So having another Pokemon that kind of sits up there in that like 120 to 130 range would be very good for this team. So that way Deoxys Speed isn't the sole speed check to most threats. So I do feel like that is something that this team needs a lot. Its low tier draft isn't the greatest either. I do like the Diancie and I like the Blastoise. I feel like the Blastoise should 100% be Terra over the Diancie. Not that Terra Diancie is bad, but I feel like Blastoise is a better Terra option. Not a fan of Meganium. Dusclops has its uses, and Dedenne is just kind of a throwaway tier 7. Feel like there are definitely better tier 7s on the board. So I feel like the low tier draft could definitely help improve and bolster this team. And also, this team has a lack of special wall breakers. This was something that I actually didn't even notice the first time I looked at it. Jake actually brought to my attention when we were going over this together. Uh, the strongest special attacker on this team is like Shell Smash Blastoise or like, Deoxys Speed, which doesn't have the greatest special. I think it's like what, base 95. So this team's special offense is very, very lacking. It's going to struggle to break some teams that have really good physical walls that kind of stonewall it. I feel like this team definitely needs especially with Blastoise not being Terra. I feel like this team definitely needs another special mon, something you can kind of just slap a specs on and just kind of blow stuff up. Actually, I do believe what Diancie I think has 100 base special attack. So there are some obviously better special attack options on the board, but I feel like this team definitely needs another good special attacker, especially something kind of fast. So I feel like that would help this team out a lot. Overall, it has a lot of cool stuff. Like this is a team that I would use, I think, but it has some once again very glaring weaknesses. Ground weakness, uh, you know, speed distribution is off, and it's going to struggle to break some Pokemon. There are definitely some teams that this team is going to struggle with. I think the direction was the right way. I think like Deoxys Speed and Garchomp are great Pokemon. I love Scissor. I think that the Blastoise is a really cool pickup. Arcanine has some flexibility. You have a grounded poison type, so it is pretty good. But at the end of the day, it's not the best, and I feel like it could definitely be a lot better because for the reasons I pointed out, like I said, shoring up some of these issues, really trying to get better offensive diversity is kind of the overall goal of this team as well. Just needs to be fast, needs to be a little faster, needs to have some higher special attack. I think would definitely benefit this team a lot. Um, yeah, with that being said, I have all of the draft grades listed here. I didn't do this in the legacy division video because I didn't think about it. I know the legacy division, their grades were a lot closer. I think the lowest grade we had was a B minus. This division, the newcomer division, their grades are a little more spread out. We have a D and we have an A plus. We do have a lot of Bs. Like I said, we have like 4 B pluses and 3 B minuses. I feel like I said, or yeah, the reason for that was just I believe that the newcomer guys, they had a good direction, right? Like they knew what they wanted to do. And like I said, filling in the gaps was the problem. Right. A lot of these teams have really good synergy where you can kind of see the idea, but then when you get down to the nitty gritty and you kind of nitpick it a little bit, you're like, yeah, they only have two hazard removers. Yeah, they only set rocks. Yeah, they have like four weaknesses to like fire or ground. Like ground was huge for a lot of these teams. Um, and those little things overall throughout the course of the series, or the series, the season, will affect how you build and how you draft, or not draft, but how you build and how you play, because they're going to limit your team a lot. And you don't want your team to be limited by a lot. Like that's the overall idea of draft, is just you're not limiting your team as much as possible. You're giving yourself as many options in the team building phase of your matches. And then when you go out and play, saying, hey, I don't know what this guy is going to do because he just has this many options. You want to give yourself that flexibility. And so I feel like um, a lot of teams kind of cut that. They limited their flexibility by not having all their bases covered, just relying on like, oh, this was my idea, and like hey, their first three or four picks have really good synergy, and then the rest of their team just kind of is there. That was the kind of the problem with some of these teams. Overall, I think people did pretty well. We do have some negatives, unfortunately. I feel like these teams, though, they can be fixed. I mean, these teams are easily fixed. Like these teams aren't Fs. I didn't give them an F because there were positive aspects. There were things that you can go out and improve these teams, and guess what? They're going to do better. So I do look forward to seeing the newcomer division. It's interesting to see people who I've never seen play before. Obviously, everybody in the legacy division, minus Scorpithan and Kesta, they're new to the legacy division. I've seen play. I've seen them play a lot. I watched all of their matches from last season. So I've seen them play. I've seen their play styles. I've seen what they can do. I'm interested to see what the new people can do. So you guys are up. Once again, if you guys disagree with this video or have something you want to tell me, let me know. Put in the comments. Say, hey, I disagree. You're an idiot. You should never make YouTube videos ever again. I would probably agree with you, but I just do it because it's fun and I run a draft league, and this is a good way to kind of communicate information to my league. So, the next video I'll probably make will probably be my week 1 match. I play. We have a season 1 SADL championship rematch against the Minnesota Glow Kings. Me and Bordak will be going at it. Until then, though, I'll see you guys later. I hope everyone stay safe in the meantime. Be good people. Be kind. But I will see y'all around. Until then, bye bye.